Ridge Farm, and welcome to the Wednesday lunch hour live stream. Um, Rowan Ridge Farm, we're raising heritage hogs on pasture. As you can probably tell, I'm not on the pasture or at the farm right now because I work off the farm in order to support my uh, pig habit. And I work at a hospital here in New Hampshire where we're doing our best to keep the farm going. And in this video today, or in this stream, I should say, I want to talk to you guys a little bit about, the hardest parts of farming, because farming is one of those things that I know when I was just getting started, I looked at it and thought, like, I see the pictures, I read the books, I went through all the Joel Salatin uh, books and kind of went through those as though they were, sort of the canon of farming scripture. And I thought to myself, I know there's a disconnect between what is written about farming, and it certainly seems like hard work, but like when you really get down to brass tacks, how hard is it? And I think that a lot of what I want to do on this channel is encourage people to start farming. But I think it's helpful to have honest conversations about what actually is the hardest part of farming so that we can really prepare for that and understand that. So I think that to put in an umbrella term, the hardest part about what we're doing with farming is the fact that there is so much uncertainty and everything depends on the weather, everything depends on, customers and animal performance and family dynamics and situations. There's so many variables in a picture at any given time that it's really difficult to know what's going to happen and to have predictability and certainty. And one of the things as humans that we really crave and that we cling to is some form of regularity where we can say, okay, I know what's going to happen. It's like people stay in jobs and relationships and all kinds of situations, housing, school, professions where they don't necessarily love it, but it's predictable. And because they know what's going to happen, they stay there. And farming is one of those things where it's not necessarily difficult as much as it is a constant adaptation process that doesn't really ever let up. But before we really get into the nuts and bolts of what makes farming difficult or what the hardest parts of farming are, because I had a couple of things, and I was thinking about this before I went into this, that I could do this live stream probably 100 times over, and it would not come out the same way 2 times in a row. And that's because of the fact that conditions are always changing on the ground. But before we get into all of that, I want to remind you that if you haven't already seen the latest video that I put out about pricing your pork for maximum profit, you can look down in the description of this video and you can take a look at that. One of the videos that I've gotten a lot of questions about over time is kind of how do you price that pork? And everybody seems to like the questions that have to do, or the videos, I should say. People like the videos that have to do with the financial side of farming and trying to make a go of things and make it profitable. And so I made video to really speak to some of the nuts and bolts of pricing, because a lot of times as small farmers we want to undersell what we're doing because it's not in a grocery store and we feel bad about charging too much. And the reality is, if you watch that video that is linked down here in the comments, and if you guys are new to my channel, please subscribe, because what we're trying to do is help to make America farmers again and encourage people to get involved with farming, either as a consumer and patronizing farms, and also just whatever level that you can to take that step and take that journey. And I know the question of how hard is farming is kind of on people's mind when they're at that stage. So you can watch some of the videos that I got linked down below here in the description, and I'll kind of touch on some of those. But I just want to invite you guys to join us as we keep going, because when you're watching something, you may not really know what goes into making our videos, but I can tell you that when people subscribe, that helps me know that we're heading in the right direction. We can do more of that, and we can build content around what you guys, the interests that you guys have. And the finances is always a big part of it. And it would be kind of like shooting fish in a barrel to say that the hardest part of farming is making money off of it. And I don't think that that's really the hardest part of farming, though. There's kind of three main things that I'm going to talk about in today's stream, and I am going to do another video that is gonna be a little bit longer, and where I'm actually gonna bring my wife on the video, Myra, and we're gonna kinda kick around some stuff together and make a little more polished, edited video. But I think that the perspective of the farmer, the main person who's out there slopping the hogs and doing the butchering and the feeding, which is myself, that's one element of it, but the family side is a very significant part of what makes farming difficult because as any person who owns their own business or ever has or ever wants to, it's worthwhile to know that if it's not just you going through the crises and the difficulties and the hardships of running a farm, it's also your family, it's your wife, it's your kids. Hello, Jada. It's good to see you. Whereabouts are you at, and what interest specifically do you have in farming? Because I'm keen to answer questions if it has to do specifically with farming, and I want to get you guys engaged. And again, if you're new to the channel, please do subscribe so that we can stay connected. Because I got some deep dives coming out that go into more of the difficulties of farming and how we can mitigate them and kind of work through them. Also, if you have interest in raising pigs, I have a deep dive coming up about genetics and breeding pigs because that's something that I've gotten a lot of questions about. And the questions that I get ultimately guide the content that I'm making and the videos that I'm doing on here because I want to have a conversation with you guys about what we're doing in the process of farming, and also, frankly, to educate people who are not farmers because there's a lot that people don't understand about farming. And so when you are starting to farm, the lonely component of farming is that everybody thinks they understand what you're doing and what's going on because they see little bits and pieces on social media. And in some ways that's good because that gets people interested and people follow it, and there's sort of an aesthetic that goes along with the sourdough and all of the farm boutique type of appearances. But at the same time, a lot of people just look at that on social media and they don't really dig any deeper, and they don't bother to really recognize the reality of what it's like on a day-to-day basis. So digging into the hard parts of farming, and I say hard parts because I'm just talking about 3 in this video today, but there's many, many more than 3, and some days it's a different mix altogether, but kind of like some of the broader things. And number 1 is just the desire to bite off more than you can chew. One of the biggest dangers and the difficulties in farming is the fact that when you get started, especially, you have very bright eyes and you just think that everything looks amazing and you want to do this. And then, well, if I could, for example, with me, it was raising pigs. So I'm going to start raising pigs. And then it was like, you know what? I'm going to start butchering pigs so that I don't have to pay somebody else to do that. And then, oh, you know what? I can actually start smoking my own bacon. And then, worse yet, I had people who liked what I was doing with the smoking and the butchering, and they said, oh, yeah, no, we like this. The problem is ultimately that with farming, none of the individual tasks that you're doing are super difficult in and of themselves, which leads you to get excited about farming, which still not a bad thing in itself. But what happens is, as that happens, you can paddle yourself out to sea and wind up in a really complicated situation that you didn't see coming because it's not like, oh, this is impossible. This is such a heavy lift. I can never do it. I'm not even going to bother trying to get involved with farming. It's like, oh no, wait a minute. I got a couple of piglets. That's not a big deal. Oh, I got a couple of little chicks. They're tiny. I put them in a box here. I put them in a little pen over there. Feed is cheap. They're not eating that much. They're tiny. They're cute. It's easy. I'm going to go to work, leave them there, little food and water, no big deal. And then 6 months later, after you continue buying more and doing more with them, then you start to realize that, oh, this actually gets exponentially more difficult, and I can't just snap my fingers and move away from it. And in the meantime, you're having to figure out watering systems and fencing systems, and you got to fix your barn, and there's got to be a tractor, and now you got to pay for the tractor. And so you have to figure out a way to, make things work budget wise there. And you're putting on all these different hats because the reality is that farming is a tremendously complex process. And I would say both a blessing and a curse of farming is that it is communal at its heart. Farming isn't something that's a lone wolf, watch me, I'm going to go be a prepper and sit out in my bunker with my, herd of goats and smoke my own meat and go fishing and everything's going to be hunky dory. The reality is that you need other people to grow the crops and the grain that you're feeding to your animals. You need somebody to do your butchering. You need somebody to do the smoking. You need somebody to transport your animals to the smoker and to the butcher, right? Like you need all of these different components in the mix so that you can find that one thing and focus. But it's really, really hard to do because it all of the different components of farming are so tangible and so tempting that biting off more than you can chew is a huge Achilles heel. And it's one of the biggest things that I would say that I caution folks to watch out for. And I did a video not that long ago, which I actually linked down in the description of this live stream about dealing with burnout, because burnout is not something that you can prevent. Burnout is something that is inevitable. You're going to have moments of burning out, and you have to prepare for that. You have to expect it so that when it happens, you know how to deal with it and you'll know what the solutions are, which ultimately it's always smaller, get rid of stuff, get rid of animals, get rid of jobs. And I also made a video, I believe, which is linked down below about not being cheap. Because one of the things that leads to burnout is the fact that it's like, oh, I want to save money. Because I want to save money, I'm going to do this welding project all myself. Now, no matter that I don't know anything about welding and I have no experience with it. And so it's going to take me 5 times as long. And I'm going to waste hundreds of dollars in man hours just trying to save, 150 bucks where I could have just paid somebody who has the equipment, can get it done in 45 minutes, and then it's a done deal, right? So being cheap and not being prepared for burnout is inviting disaster. And so being able to force yourself into a box where you're forced to focus and cut things down and always take on less than the maximum of what you can handle. Because to my very first opening point in this stream, anytime you're doing something with farming, uncertainty is the only thing you can be certain of. It's baked into the cake. And with uncertainty being so present, you have to prepare for the fact that you're not going to have ideal circumstances where you can carry max capacity. You always carry less than what you can do, so you have wiggle room for when somebody dies, one of the animals presumably dies, there's a health problem, there's a problem getting feed. You have wiggle room to be able to make that work. Um, Joby Portillo says, what state are you farming out of? I am in Western New Hampshire, kind of middle in the north-south vector and towards the western part of the state. Another thing that makes farming kind of difficult is that when you're trying to talk to people about farming, so much of it is, especially when you're talking about numbers and trying to calculate costs and profits. Like the last video that I was asking you guys to check out that I linked below here in the stream description about pricing pork and pricing it for profit, not pricing it so that you can get rid of it because you're worried about having to feed the animals or you need room in the freezer, pricing yourself out of business, but pricing for profit so that you can actually continue doing the thing that you're doing that you love, that's a service to your community. But one of the things that makes a video like that so difficult to make is that somebody out in Iowa is going to watch that video. Well, probably not in Iowa because they know all this stuff already because their grandparents taught them when they were, knee high to a grasshopper. But a lot of places where people don't are watching from different parts of the country, they hear the numbers that I'm using. And I say I sell piglets for $150 a pop. And it's like they're having an aneurysm because, oh my goodness, how do you get away with that? How come they haven't like dragged you away to prison to tar and feather you publicly for ripping people off and selling piglets for that high of a price? But the reality is the cost of grain and all the other resources and also the additional costs of like having a winter that's a month longer on either side of the season, those costs all factor into what you're doing. And so the cost of producing pork in New Hampshire is going to be different than the cost in Pennsylvania, even though they're kind of close on a map. Again, it goes back to that variability. Um, so managing time and managing your own desire to wear too many hats and burn yourself out and being cheap is a big part of what motivates that. And I'm one of the cheapest people to walk the face of the planet. So I'm like, these are lessons that I have learned the hard way through my own flaws. And farming definitely teaches you a lot about the flaws that you have. You come face to face with that stuff very often. So to kind of move it to the next of the two things or three things that I wanted to focus on for like the difficult aspects of farming is working off of the farm is really difficult. So, and ironically, I'll give you guys a little spoiler alert. Not working off of the farm and just relying on your small farm for income is also the third thing, because you're kind of stuck in this no man's land. And in this no man's land between, I want to work another job so I can have health insurance. And health insurance is absolutely another one of the hardest parts of farming, because when you work for a company, they take a couple $100 out of your paycheck every couple weeks, and then your family is covered. I have been living with type 1 diabetes since I was 16 years old. I'm about to turn 43. Insulin is not cheap, and the monitoring equipment that goes along with it that enables me to be healthy enough to not be living under the burden of a chronic health condition that forces me to be less productive on the farm requires that I maintain my health. And then you see this same exact thing playing out with older folks that are aging out and are kind of aging into illnesses and conditions that make it more difficult to manage. Joby says, I'm from West Virginia and we're big on gardens, industrial farming, even ethically. We have so much land, it's ridiculous, and we're in poverty. Um, and that's, and regionally, that's a big thing. Yeah, being able to um, make use of the land and then connect with the right customer so that you're not just stuck with a bunch of products that you can raise, but to raise it in a way or in a place where you can connect with the people that have the resources to be able to take that off your hands. And a lot of that balance is kind of what I've encountered, granted in a different way than maybe what you have going on in West Virginia, but in New Hampshire, trying to figure out a way to work off the farm in order to maintain health insurance, because it's almost like two-thirds of the mortgage payment to insure my family. I got four kids, five, the fifth on the way, my wife and myself. And of course, when you don't really need health insurance, you can kind of say, ah, the hell with it, because you're just looking at hospital bills. But my medication is like, if I were buying medication without insurance and I had to pay out of pocket, it would probably be around 15, 17 with all my stuff. It would be probably like 17, $1,800. And I could go on at length, which maybe sometime I will, about the evils of the pharmaceutical industry, and ironically, the fact that a lot of the pharmaceutical industry makes use of waste products from the slaughtering pigs to make a lot of their medications, including insulin in some parts of the world where there's porcine insulin and bovine insulin where they make it from cows as well. But that's a whole nother ball of wax. Um, and so, like, the option to just not have health insurance isn't really a thing that I can do responsibly. So I work off the farm at the hospital. And to be really honest with you, it's nice to not have to be reliant on what I'm doing on the farm in order to pay my mortgage, keep the lights on in the house. The reality is that there are some times when, like, mama has a bad litter of piglets, or mama does poorly and squashes a bunch of the piglets, even though she had a bunch. Or I had a situation that happened, which I'll do a longer video about this when we kind of get into talking about the pork. But I was having one of my pigs butchered. I sold a whole hog, two whole hogs, and I was getting them both done on the same day. Told the customers, your pigs are going to the freezer. It's going to be really good. We're looking forward to it. This is, you know, it's always a nice feeling when you kind of reach that end point and you're looking forward to having some income and you're getting your feed bill a little bit carved out. And one of the pigs, she had some weird like lung condition, and I don't know whether it was strictly what was going on with her lungs, like the membrane surrounding her lungs had actually cavitated into the loin and was like growing into her rib cage, and apparently she had had some what looked like chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD, which I see a lot in the hospital here with older folks that smoke and like West Virginia and the coal mines and stuff like that. It gives a version of that. And basically, her meat, it was like she was anemic. The meat was very light pink and it just didn't look right. And there was my butcher told me, he said, and I'm going to do a video, I promise, where I'm going to have Doug, my butcher, in that video, and you guys can meet him. He's a really, really cool guy, and one of the good people that I met in this process of farming that I've been really appreciative of. But he was honest, and he just said, "Look, man, I can't let you sell this. Like, this is going to be bad for you. It's going to be bad for me." And like the price that you're charging for this meat, you got to give them a better product. This isn't going to work. And he sent me some pictures because I'm always asking for pictures and kind of like, feedback. I take like little chunks of kind of scrap meat off the jowl or whatever just to get an idea, make sure the flavor is okay before I, send it off to be processed for my customers. But I was supposed to get 2 pigs worth of profit. And what wound up happening is one of the pigs is going to be dog meat. Actually, might not even be dog meat, just depending. I got to assess the meat once I get it back. But I paid for 2 pigs to get butchered, and I'm only able to sell one of them, which means that pretty much excluding sausage and smoking. And Doug, my butcher, he gave me a break on the sausage and he said, "Look, man, that sucks that happened. I'm gonna, give you the sausage for nothing on the," because basically what I did is I took the other pig that was good that I did at that session and I split that pig in half and I asked the customers, I said, "Look, here's what happened. Would you guys be willing to each take a half of this one?" Which was a big pig. I mean, she hung at like I think 380 or something. She was a big girl. And so they were both understanding and they appreciated where I was coming from. They said, "Okay, no problem." They each took a half, but I still had to pay processing because, butcher puts his time in to take the animal apart. I'm not going to stiff him. And that stuff happens. And in a situation where that happened, excuse me, it really sucks. And it sucks emotionally because you put a lot of time and effort in those animals. And then you also really want your customers to be excited. You want your customers to be happy because they've been waiting for 6 months or whatnot to get their pork and you want it to really be worth the wait. And then you have to tell them, "Hey, guess what? It was like subpar because there was a medical thing going on that kind of came out of nowhere. And so now we have to take a different course." And that's really disappointing. And you feel like a failure. And it's like you failed your animal because, like, maybe if I had known, then I could have gotten her some help, gotten her better. And then eventually we could have had a better experience for everybody involved. But the reality is there's nothing you can do about it. But the good news is I'm not thinking, "Oh crap, how am I going to pay my mortgage? How am I going to pay my light bill?" Because now my 2 pigs that I sent to the butcher turned into 1 pig that I sent to the butcher. And now I'm, just struggling and drowning and I got to find a way to make that up. I'm not in that situation because of the fact that I work off the farm. And so if you're working off the farm, there's a tremendous financial benefit, which gives you a lot more ability to detach and put a little distance between yourself and what's going on the ground so that you are able to make decisions in a way that you're not making decisions out of desperation. So there is desperation, certainly. And again, this goes back to the ebb and flow of the seasons and the temperature. In the fall, there's not a lot of buyers for piglets. And most of what I do here is breeding piglets. And so in the fall, I'm always thinking, how am I going to get enough money over the summer and going into the fall so that I have financial momentum to be able to buy feed in the coldest part of the winter in New Hampshire when nobody is really buying piglets because there's a few brave souls that'll buy in the fall. I would argue that the fall is actually an easier time to raise, like fall through the winter and then butcher in the spring, than doing it through the summer and butchering in the fall. But that's another conversation for another time. And, but there's not a lot of piglet sales to where I can just kind of anytime I need feed, it's like I got piglets going out the door and we got feed coming in and it all kind of breaks even like it is in the spring and even in the summer. So I'm kind of looking at a barn full of pigs and not a lot of sales going on. And it's like, uh-oh, how am I going to do this? And somebody comes to me and says, which this actually wound up working out as a great opportunity, but it was also what wound up happening is I bit off more than I could chew in this situation because like we're going into the winter, I need money, and here's an opportunity to, well, just raise a handful of pigs and they're all going to go to the butcher, but I don't have a separate barn to do different things in because the feeder pigs need to get fed and they need to get big. The breeder pigs need to not get fed too much and they need to stay slim so that they can have a longer breeding lifespan. But basically, I was like, "I need money, and there's, an offer here to get a good-sized deposit on a big group of pigs. I'm gonna feed them out. How hard can it be? I'll have money to feed everybody through the winter. I'll figure out the logistics. It can't be that bad. They're piglets, they're tiny. I'll get everything set up and sorted out, and by the time they're big, it'll be springtime, and it won't be that big of a deal." And as my friend Murphy, likes to say, that's going to be a no on that one. And it turned into a bit of a cluster. We managed, figured it out. But one of the things that I figured out was you got to be careful not to make decisions out of desperation because that's why we work off the farm is to buy that distance. Like I see this a lot in the fall, especially in New Hampshire, anywhere where there's like hard winters. I suspect that this is the case where you see people trying to get out from underneath animals that they were really excited and happy to feed in the warmer months. And then all of a sudden it's like now they're big and now I don't have money coming in. And now everybody just wants to button up for the winter and go away, and uh-oh, I better figure something out quick, and I can't afford to keep them because I wasn't prepared for that, and it turns into a wash, and you see a lot of that, and it's kinda sad, because you feel bad for the animals, and on some level, sometimes you feel bad for the people as well, because it's not just, like, people completely being derelict in their responsibility, it's just the way that it goes, like, if you hit a bump in the road at the wrong time of the year, that's gonna really knock you for a loop, where there's other times of the year where you can have a really bad, couple farrowings, and you can still absorb it and it doesn't really hurt you, but you get close to the winter, those same things are gonna really make it hard for you to keep going, and so you have to time where you take your hits, hopefully, in a way that that goes well, but being able to detach from that, I can see that there are people who, like, are farming and that's their source of income without any off-farm income, and when they get up against it, they get desperate, and you can see it reflected in their pricing. You can see it reflected in their social media posting, and you know that it's not just like, "Well, you know what? This is what I need to get for it, but if I can't, I'll just hold on to it because I know what my stuff is worth." It's like, "If I don't sell this, I can't pay for the lights, so one way or the other, this has to go." And that desperation ultimately is something that I don't think helps the community in terms of farming because it ultimately undercuts prices for everybody. And, it doesn't, it's something that I've chosen to try to avoid because someday, people ask me here at my day job, they say, "Oh, are you ever going to like farm full time?" And like, maybe, there's part of me that I would like to. I would like to farm more than I am currently. Like, I'd like to spend more time on my farm than I currently do and have more time to work because big downside with time is that they're not making any extra. You only have 24 hours in a day, and there's, people and priorities and things that you have to attend to, and you can't go beyond what you have available. So I would love to be able to have more time to be on my farm, but doing that as my sole source of income, it also makes it so that you're really up against it. You're very committed. And if anything goes wrong, then you're in a situation where you got to be kind of desperate and really figure out a way to make things work. Whereas working off the farm, I have the luxury, if you will, to be able to say, you know what, if I have bad farrowing, I can still buy feed for my animals. I don't have to fold up the whole operation and sell my, feeders and sell my all of my breeding stock because I had something go wrong. I'm able to kind of absorb and move on. And so to the extent that, you can diversify, that's a big help. But working off the farm for income, it's difficult because the time that you spend here, there are so many things that I need to get done, and winter is coming. In New Hampshire, it comes early and it comes hard. And that's what she said. And there's so much of that that it's a constant thought in my mind as soon as like the first warmth of spring comes through. It's like I'm already behind for this coming fall, and it's not even summertime yet. And now, as summer's winding down, I'm trying to think, okay, what are the biggest things that are the highest priority things that I can squeeze in before winter gets here. And sometimes winter takes a little longer. It's cold, but you can still, until there's snow blowing around, most of the things I can still do work wise in terms of like fencing and moving the pigs around, and we keep them out on out on the pasture until it starts snowing, and then we pull everybody back to the barn and kind of huddle in for the duration. But you're really up against it time wise, even though you have that benefit of having off farm income that gives you, and that off farm income, though, to look at that on that flip side, that off farm income is a break from the stress of farming. It's a different kind of stress, certainly, but it's a break from that type of stress. So you always feel like you're shifting gears, and it's not like it gets too heavy, because when it gets too heavy at work, all right, well, I'm done at work here. I'm going to go home, and now I'm going to have a bunch of stress from the farm, but it's a different kind of stress that I haven't been carrying all day. So it's like, oh, cool. Like I'm fresh. I'm ready to go. And there's some benefit there. So working off the farm is a challenge. Not working off the farm is a challenge. And the reality is that there are challenges available all over the place with farming. There's not one thing that is the hardest thing. It's that there are so many different things that, in and of themselves, are not that difficult, which has a bright side to it. There's a silver lining to that cloud, which is that if you're interested in farming and this is something that you've been thinking about, getting started is an easy thing to do. The problem is that it's difficult to stop. And like the gas pedal works great. You can always accelerate, you can always get more animals, buy more piglets, put up a little more fencing. It's easy to get going. The hard part is, how do you land the plane? When I used to climb, one of the famous sayings in climbing is the summit is optional, getting to the top of the mountain is optional, the descent is mandatory, on the other hand. And you do well to remember that as you're carving out the challenges that you're choosing to take on as we do farming, because planning ahead, talking to those who have been there, which again is one of the big reasons why I want to have this YouTube channel going and putting out content. And like I said, I've got a couple videos that I'm going to do. I want to do one video just really talking about the struggles and the reasons that small farms tend to fail. And it's not necessarily like this is how you can avoid it, because some of it is just circumstantial. That's just what life is. But some of it is also just for commiseration, because when you're on a farm and you're doing this stuff, people don't understand what's going on. It's just like, oh yeah, the guy that used to my breed piglets for me, they went out of business. Oh, what happened with them? Oh, I don't know, but they're not breeding anymore. So, anyways, what do you have? And people don't really internalize and understand what is involved, and being able to unpack some of that stuff, I think, is useful, maybe interesting, maybe a little therapeutic as well. And in doing so, I'm hoping that we can maybe defang the fear of getting into farming for those who are on the sidelines, and get you guys more involved in the game. And for those of you who are already in it, we can kind of commiserate about what it's like, and maybe try to remember why it was that we got started doing this stuff in the first place. Because some days it's can be really really challenging to remember that, but it's It's not something that I would call fun or easy, but it's relatively simple, and it gets better. The highs are really high and the lows are really low, and it kind of averages out over time, but you got to put that time in and understand that whatever highs that you experience, there's going to be lows that are going to come along to balance that out, and you have to kind of take that in stride. And the good news is that getting started is relatively easy, even today in 2025 when the world is kind of going tits up in a lot of ways. Anyways, guys, I appreciate you taking the time to spend this lunch half hour or so with me. Um, if you're not subscribed to the channel, I know at least half of my audience of two people is subscribed to the channel already. But anyone else who comes across this, watch some of the videos that I linked down below, dealing with the topics that we were kind of going through over this last half hour. Leave a comment and let us know what you guys want to hear about, what you guys want to talk about, and we'll be making more videos right here. And we're going to go out there and work every day to make America farmers again. And right now, I'm going to go back to work in the hospital and try to help make people more compliant diabetics, because that's my job in the hospital when I'm not on here talking about pigs and farming and all that jazz. So I appreciate you guys tuning in for this. Every Wednesday, I'm going to be doing a live stream between 2 and 3 p.m. I'm adding more live streams as we go along because the live streams are relatively simple to do, and I can do them while I am at my off-farm job because I have good service here, and I can take a little time and do that. On the farm, my service is terrible, so I can't really live stream from the farm, at least not right now. I'm going to try to get some Starlink set up there, but that's been a real nightmare. Tried it over the last year, and it hasn't gone great so far, but hopefully we can get that to work. But I want to keep this conversation going with you guys, and I hope to hear from you as we move forward. You guys have a good afternoon. We'll see you all on the next video.